This whole biblical expression of seeing ourselves in God's image. That's us. We're here to identify with God. We're here to identify with the creative forces. We're here to become gods ourselves in that sense. Because we're here to be one with the totality, and the totality is nothing but a matrix of gods. This is a very beautiful thing. This whole process that comes out of what at the mundane level isn't so pretty, after all. It just isn't. We needed to get to this point of this vast expansion of our population and all the aura boxes of the world and the byproduct of all of that and all of those things that come with it and all of the pain and suffering of the many that cannot gain access to the success of our species. That also to see that there's a real glory in this. The glory is that there is a way for us to be educated to going beyond godliness. There's a way for us to be educated to the point that we transcend all of that. In other words, that we truly know what we are within the whole. Not where, but what we are and what our contribution is to the whole, so we can be identified with that process. I love just the basics of what the yin is. I'm a great admirer of the yin. I'm a great servant of the yin. And I like its snappiness. It brings you to attention. It says, hey, look, this running around is terrific. It's very impressive to see you running up and down and running up and down. And it's real impressive that you can build those huts and you can build those statues and you can build those temples. I'm only interested in one thing. I'm interested in staying alive. Staying alive is what it's all about. Oh, yes, the yang can say life, 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 and wriggle and wriggle and wriggle. But it's the yin that says, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me. After the wriggling comes feeding time, that you have to survive. That you have to be able to deal with the fact that you are in a body. Being is matter, matter is. This is the yin-yin. This is the yin-yin. This is the polarity to the first base. You'll notice that the way in which these are being drawn out for you, pay attention to that configuration because it's slightly different than you would expect normally. In other words, you've had the yang-yang first, then you have the yang-yin. Now you have the yin-yin, and we'll finish with the yin-yang. Now, what the yin-yin brings us is that the yin-yin brings us something very basic. Survival operates two ways. Two ways. One way of survival is that you have to be able to satisfy the body. And in satisfying the body, that means that you need to have a proper combination of both solid and liquid going into you. And the other part of that is the survival of the species that is being itself surviving. And if you look at that, you could really take away being and you could substitute sex, body and sex. You could put those two in that sense together. Remember that from the base level, sex has absolutely nothing to do with the rave level. In other words, this is pure biological imperative. This is the genetic imperative that says we need to multiply. Sex is survival. It is survival for the species. And you know very well that you're not going to be able to do well if you cannot reproduce, because sooner or later you're going to die out. And of course, this is deeply opposite what is built into us dimensionally, that we are here to survive. Over and over and over again in my lifetime, I have been astonished at human tenacity for survival. It boggles the mind. what human beings will put up with, the tortures they'll put up with, the handicaps they'll put up with, the discomforts they'll put up with, the tenacity within us to stay alive. This is the mother's gift, after all. You see, it's not enough to be alive. You want to stay alive. That's the whole thing. It's what the yin brings. It says, hey, excuse me, survival. Survival's number one. And for survival number one, we have to do a number of things. The first thing that we have to do is that we have to realize something very basic. You're not going to be able to eat well if you hunt alone. That's such a basic thing. Not only that, you're not going to be able to trust who's hunting to feed you unless you have some kind of way of making sure of that. That's sex. See, we're designed to come together. We're designed to reproduce. The yin is designed to nurture. The yang, and I'm speaking of pure yin, pure yang, not what's in between. The yang is there to go out and penetrate. But you see, we cannot do that alone. We can't do that alone, and only the mother can do that because the mother is never truly alone. Because the mother is always there to carry and reproduce and create life. They're a medium for life. The yin is a medium for life. This is not about sex as pleasure. This is not about sex as activity. This is not about sex as philosophy or technique. This is none of those things. This is basic requirement. This is being alive 101. And this moment that you have the yin there, you must have the reproductive potential. You know, I enjoy these journeys that we take together because I get a lot of jokes as I move along the way. And it's wonderful to see that the first base says, where, and the second base says, what? But then you bring in the yin, and she says, okay, when? It's wonderful. There's the yang saying, oh, I'm going to build you this wonderful. And she says, when? How long do I have to survive until I can finally see that? Oh, it's a delight. Hillel was a Judaic scholar who lived at the same time as Christ. And he said, if you are not for yourself, who will be? And if you were only for yourself, what are you? And if not now, when? It's a great piece of business. And it's something for us to understand about what the mother really brings. Okay, when? When are you going to wake up? When are you going to get it right? When are you going to learn how to survive? When are you going to learn the things that you really need to learn and not all that stuff out there? When are you going to learn to be a decent human being? When are you going to learn to be yourself? When are you going to learn to serve? All of that comes out of the mother. But the mother teaches us something even deeper than that. The mother knows that fate, in the broadest sense of that word, underlines everything, that the mother is helpless, like all of us. And it is helpless in the context of what you see here, the quality here. This is not about character, this is biology. It's not about what you think your status is. This is biological. This is about the physical being. This is about sustaining the physical being. And to sustain the physical being, there's something that's absolutely essential that only the mother brings. Touch. Oh, how sensuous the yin-yin is. Because everything for them operates through touch. And touch is not something that works at a distance. It's not. You got to get close. You have to come together. Now look, you come together. This is one of the things that's so interesting about the yin-yin, is that the yin-yin demands that survival and the problems of survival are dealt with. They don't necessarily deal with it themselves. They don't necessarily. They find others to collaborate with. And that collaboration is rooted in sex. I don't want to upset the males here. But I will anyway. I mean, we're pretenders to any throne in all of this business between the sexes. Always have been. Regardless of what the social patina is or what the game of the civilization is. Because in the end, it's in the hands of the mother. It's in the hands of the yin. And it's up to the yin whether we can embrace or not. Remember that the best that the yang yin can do, the best that the second base can do, is that it can build its hut in an area where others build their huts that are not really uncomfortable for them. But that's not really collaboration. That's just the inability to escape the fact that we need to be together. But the second base is all busy building their separate shelter. It is the mother. It is the yin-yin that says, yes, 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 very nice. However, come out of there now. You come out of those inside worlds that you think are so important for you, and you come out into this outside world and you help us survive. Because if you don't help us survive, your inside world is going to dissolve and fall apart. That your mental world, remember that that's just a metaphor. The second base brings this enclosure, your private world, but it's also your mental plane. And the mother brings you back to your body. She says, all that's very nice, dear. I'm glad you're enjoying yourself. Would you have your dinner now? Sustenance, baby. Put some food in there. Because that's what the third base is about. And this is as objective as we get. The yin-yin is the ultimate objective force. It is literally out of the yin-yin that we come to what I bring you, which is this knowledge. In other words, it is here that we get to the point that we are able to clearly see the I am. The I am without the conditioning of the outside world. Just purely the I am vibrating within this biological matrix, and this biological matrix in a geometry, in the macrocosmic. To be able to see that this touch and sex and survival, that how deeply they're linked to each other, but they're linked to each other as objectivity, as geometry, as trajectory. See, the wisdom of the mother is not to resist. You ever go through birthing, either as a woman or as a partner, and you know right away that the good midwife who's going to take you through that process is going to say, now look, you cannot resist this. You cannot try to hold this back. You cannot fight this. You've got to let go in that sense. You have to let all of that happen. And one of the things that's deep within the female psyche, the yin-yin psyche, out of menstruation, out of childbirth, is all of these things that you're helpless to deal with. Males don't get that. Yang doesn't deal with that. And it changes the consciousness. Deeper into the helplessness of the biology, ruled by the hormones, ruled by all of that. And of course, it's true. It's true. And when you get down to this level where you're looking at the genetics, what you're seeing is, yes, it's true. We are the byproduct of our genes. We are. It doesn't mean, by the way, that the genes are everything, because that's something that people get caught up in and don't realize. You know, one of the things that design obviously teaches you is that you have your own unique genetic matrix. That's obvious. But at the same time, you're designed to be nurtured, what we call the conditioning that takes place when we interact through those gates or centers or channels or whatever that get defined. And that nurturing obviously is a deep part of our lives, because we are not separate from the other. That our psychic health, that our physical well-being is going to be integrated in our relationship with the other and the other in our aura. So it's important to see that the I am here is essential, because without that clear recognition of who you are, you're not going to be able to clearly see what is out there around you. The other thing is, you're not going to be surrendered. This is the one place where geometry and trajectory, what we talk about when we talk about profile, this is the one place where all of that is the theme. That it is all a movement. That it happens because it's a movement. And that's something that the yin is deeply aware of. That they have no control. They don't. None whatsoever. But out of that, they can know their form, because the form is everything. To find out what food is right to put into the body, how to get the food that you need into the body, how to develop ultimately the techniques for that. This search for survival, and yet at the same time never being allowed to escape the sexuality that is caught up in all of this. Everywhere you look, every instant, every moment, sex is happening. I mean, I'd like you to think about that. Everywhere, all the time, every instant. You know, bees do it, birds do, ba 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 ba. It's going on all the time, all the time, all the time, all the time. It never stops. You know, there's a statistic that says that a man has an erection for a minimum of 2 hours a day. Men are not allowed to blush at that. You know, it's built into the mechanism. It's built into the sexuality of the world. It is built into us being animals. It's there. Remember, again, we are still not at a base that is human. This is life. Life is sex. Life is survival. It's everywhere out there. There is nothing you can do. I had a delightful experience in Los Angeles. Eleanor and Marvin have a pool. And a duck has taken over and commanded that pool, who I have named Wilson. He's a very interesting duck. And Wilson lives in the pool, and Wilson has a mate. Now, Wilson found this pool. This is a Hollywood duck, eh? You know, it found this pool. It found a pool that's never used. It's not really chlorinated. It's kind of like normal. And it has human fools that are supplying it with duck food, if you can imagine. So it's got real duck food. Every afternoon, I watched. I loved this. You know what to do. Every afternoon, the duck, Bessie is her name, she would fly in from sitting on the eggs, right? And she'd come over and he'd do his little preening. And then he'd show her the way to the duck food. And she'd go over there and she'd eat and she'd eat and she'd eat. And he'd stand back very quietly, very patiently, going back and forth, watching her go through this whole movie. And when she was finally finished eating and she went back into the pool, he would immediately jump on her and make love to her. Nearly drowning the poor thing, dragging her down after dinner, drag her down under the water, make love to her, come up to the surface, go bada, bada, bada. You know, she flies off. He goes over to the food and stands by it like a sentinel. You know, that's what it's all about. And, you know, she knows that he's a Hollywood duck. He did really good for her. I mean, she gets first-class food. You know, it's an ancient bargain. It's an old piece of business, and it's in every form of life, and it's going on all the time. And don't drink their water out of the pool. Oh, I could get terribly rude. It leads us. Oh, God. It leads us to I am. You know, I'm the duck that's got the duck food. You know, it leads us to the I am. You know, this is where we are. You see, the yang is separate, but it's mental. See, the yin knows something else about separateness, that separateness is housed. You know, it's housed in these vehicles. It's housed in these bodies. The mother is always ready to honor the body first. After all, it's the yang that insists that there is something worth building a temple to. You know, the yin already knows it's the body, and the female has always known that it's their body, after all. I mean, it is clear that the female body is the temple of life. It is clear. And it's always been that way. I mean, most temples have been nothing but yonis forever. You know, their entranceways were just, you know, cosmic vaginas, and that's what it was all about. Because that is the temple of life, and so they're not deeply impressed with all that yang, ba. You know, yes, okay, you build it out of stone, Harry. You know, real life comes out of me. You know, it's one of the basic conflicts in the psyche between the male and the female. And it is the source of yin power. You know, it is its source. It is the life font. And it knows better than anyone else what the resources must be in order for those lives that it can carry to survive. Because survival means everything. If you're designed, remember, males cannot grasp this. If you're designed to carry life, that means inside of you, you have to have some kind of assurance, some way of imagining that you're going to be able to bring sustenance to that life. You know, the great horror photograph is the starving mother, you know, with the empty breasts and the dying child nursing at that. You know, there's nothing more horrifying in the human psyche than such an image. You know, they have to know within themselves. It's an essential ingredient. And what that means is that by knowing within themselves what's necessary for the survival, that the only way that they can work that out is that they have to know their own power. And out of their own power, they can collaborate to get the resources that they need. You see, the yin understands that they have to put up with the yang. Well, they do. They just understand that. Yeah, he's a man. What are you going to do? You know, the yin knows that. Men don't say that. Only women say that because it's true. You know, they know that they're putting up with the male because they have to, because they get certain advantages out of the male. They get certain advantages out of the yang. Now remember, I'm talking in archetypes here. Obviously, that works at many different levels when you get to the surface and you get all these mixes inside of us of a little bit of this and a little bit of that and everything else. But you know, when you're looking at it purely this way, please understand that's what it's all about. And the power of the yin is touch. This is the great female power. This is truly their magic. It's their touch. And that touch carries everything that they need to find the collaboration, because it's only the yin that will do that. The yin-yin. It will reach out and it will touch. And you see, then it gets the yang to go all kind of squishy and whooshy. You know, and the yang says, can I build a temple for you? You know. And by the way, you know, before I build the temple, Do you have some place, nice place where we can go off together? And the yin going, man, what to do? Because, of course, that's the way it is, and it's the way that it's always been. And then we run around with all these psychological problems about that, Men trying to be big shots, only to discover that they're really kind of, there's all this stuff going on. It's very funny. Because when you get right down to the source of it, if you don't bring morality to these things, it's so easy to dump on roles. It really is. But if you don't deal with the morality of that, you can see the beauty in each of them, the power in each of them, the specialness of each of them, because after all, we're part of all of that. It's what makes the world go round. But it's essential to see here what comes out of the yin with a beauty in that sense, because it is a life force. It is bringing real life, not the illusion of the light that says, tomorrow we go to the next valley, And there's the yin saying, oh, I got to pack again. It's just the way that it goes. The question of when. The yang says, it's all okay. The yin says, yes, but, excuse me, tomorrow? And the next day? And the next day after that? You see, the yin is very concerned with the future because it is a life creator. No female, no human female, is going to bond with any male unless there is a mechanism inside of them that says they've got a chance, at least 50-50, that it will last 7 years. Not more, not less. But that is the formula that's there inside. Because that basic formula, and remember, civilization gets in the way of these things. We have intellectual patterns and conditioned ways of dealing with things. But the fact of the matter is, at the biological level, a female is only going to be interested in a yang force that is going to stay around long enough to be able to nurture any young that are the byproduct. In other words, they're looking for a certain kind of stability. They're looking for a certain kind of status. And that you can see right away that the third base and the second base have this very, very specific relationship to each other. The second base says, here is my status. And the third base says, I don't know if it's enough. I really don't know if it's enough. I don't know, Harry, with the job that you have, if we can afford to have children. I don't think you've got a good enough status there, Harry. You don't even have daycare at your office, blah, blah, blah. These are basic themes. And so it's something to understand about the psyche of the yin, is that the psyche of the yin is always looking for long-term stability. In other words, it's looking for cyclical stability, and cyclical stability that's going to be based on this 7-year pattern. That's why the when is such a question. When is the time to do things? When? And this is one of the things that's so interesting about the way in which evolution works, is that all living forms have different breeding seasons. But no breeding season has been more mutated or evolved than the human breeding season. The fact of the matter is that we don't have a season. We have human open breeding season. We don't have that. I think that'd be kind of fun. Wouldn't that be kind of fun? 1 month a year, all of us running naked through the woods, chasing each other, just like deer. And then the rest of the year, we could leave all that alone. No? See, that's why we're human. Yeah, I know. Yeah. We're human. We don't like that. No, I don't want to do that. We mean once a year running through the woods. I don't want to do that. Every other day? Twice on the weekends? Whatever the case may be. Human beings. So what we've done is that we've taken all of that here in the third base. All of that has been changed. It's been changed for a very simple thing. It's been changed in order to benefit the female. Been changed to benefit the yin. Let me describe how that works. There is a collection of monkeys that lives in South America, in Guyana, and they're called howlers. And howler monkeys are like all primates. They are highly community oriented. They're very intelligent. All of those kinds of things. Now, one of the things that's very interesting about monkeys is that you'll end up with rogue groups. In other words, you'll end up with males that don't have females, that are not welcome into certain social groups. And what they will do is that they will wage war, quite literally. They will attack another group, and they will either kill, and they're quite capable of doing that, they will either kill, but in most cases scare off the males that are there. Now, what they will do is that they will kill any female. They will kill any female that is carrying a child. But they will not kill a female that is open to them sexually. All right? So the howler monkey has a very interesting thing. The howler monkey developed a biological mutation. And the biological mutation they developed is that female howlers can fake being in heat even if they're pregnant. They can fake it. So she's there saying, oh yeah, you ran off that guy. That's great because I didn't like him. And I'm here and I'm ready. And you don't have to kill me and everything's cool. And by the way, this baby inside that I'm carrying, that's yours. Ain't mama smart. You see, it started as a strategy to protect the female. After all, if the female could only be in heat once a year, the human female, she only had one bargaining chip a year. That's all there was. And of course, the yang is wild. How are you going to control all that useless yang energy? You have to have a way of controlling that. So the way of controlling that is saying, okay, I'm hot all the time. I'm available all the time. Maybe. Yeah, not tonight, Harry. You didn't do the garbage. Oh, yeah. This third base, eh? I mean, if you like women, you really appreciate it. If you don't like women, you got a real problem. And think about the men that are carrying this, because it speaks a lot about what happens to them at the surface of their lives. It has a deep impact on them because this is a very, very yin base. So you have people that have sexual gender crises because of the nature of this base, and it's very common. I shouldn't say that because that's not true. I simply know that. I've only seen it in a couple of cases. I can't exaggerate that. The fact is that, for me anyway, it's clear that that's something that you'll see. In other words, that this very yin-yin base, when it's going to be, something that's carried by a male, isn't necessarily going to be something that they might find easy to carry. And again, you can't really identify with that. You can't really know why that is there inside of you and why that is a process inside of you. And obviously, we're going to have a lot of men, going to have a lot of males that are going to carry this yin-yin base and the confusion that comes with all of that. In the same way that, female that is going to be first base is going to have difficulty with deeper aspects of her feminine or yin nature. Because there's going to be all of this yang at work that's going to be the facet focus. And, one of the things you'll see is, for example, if somebody is a third base and they're in a male body, they're probably in female bodies 80 or 90% of their incarnations. In other words, every once in a while they have to have a taste of being thrown into a vehicle that's different. And again, you'll see that when I do your bases, you'll see that you're always going to have a different configuration, number configuration between the personality base and the design base. And so you get to see the kind of difficulties in that sense that you can run into. The whole business of collaboration. You can see that the only way that you can collaborate with the yang is that you have to collaborate at a material level with them. That's what the yin tells the yang. This is what the yin teaches the yang. In other words, it says that, look, all of this has to be physically concretized, that we physically have to work together. In that physically working together, that's the way in which everything works. Because remember something here. The quality. The quality's biology. I wrote about it in one of the recent updates. It was really an experience for me in the last Rave Life Science series that I was doing on rave biology and the rave biological matrix. That you're stunned when you look at people's charts to realize how little of our biological processes we are fixed. You know, how little definition in that sense, how little definition as a general population that we have in this basic biological circuit. You see, there's something that the mother understands very deeply. That the mother understands that the biology is the whole. It is family. It is family that becomes clan. It is clan that becomes tribe. It is tribe that becomes nation. It is nation ultimately that can recognize race. And out of race, ultimately, hopefully, we come to final collaboration and the wholeness of species. But you know, all of this collaboration, all of this stuff, you know, we need, you know, we're driven out of the survival to collaborate with the other, but to collaborate with them at that material level. It has to be worthwhile. You have to get something for that. There's a bargain. There's a deal. There's a deal here in the third base. There's a deal that says, I am the queen. I am the high priestess. I am the queen bee or the queen ant. I am the continuity and the flow of life itself. And if you want your species to survive, you look after me. Otherwise, there is no flow of life. And as long as males were ignorant of how pregnancy operated, which was true until about 2,000 years ago, funny enough, men are dumb, that the great mystery and power of the yin was obvious then. I mean, this was the continuity of life itself, the mystery of life. I've mentioned this before. You know, it is spooky to see a male come out of a female body, see a little penis coming out of a vagina. It's one of the strangest, I mean, I've watched it. It's bizarre. It's like, well, how does that work? You know, the female coming out of the female, that's okay. You know, that's one of their own. You know, they can make their own. You know, but they're making me. That's an incredible power. And you see, the way that power is honored is that it's fed and housed and clothed by the yang. That's the way it's supposed to be. Oh yeah, it's not about saying that, you know, again, please don't misunderstand this. I'm not talking about how we apply this in our culture. I'm not about to say that, you know, every woman should be in the home and blah, 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 and all of this. I mean, you know, blah. It's not about that, you know, but it is about seeing that the fact that we do have that kind of thematic, it's rooted in the basic way in which life works, in the basic way in which the yin works, and that all of us have to deal with that in our lives one way or another. There's no way of escaping that. At the same time, we have complexities in our design in which we're going to have very yang women, we're going to have very yin men, and all kinds of combinations in between. And of course, it's the respect for those variations that's changed, at least in some societies now, the way in which women can operate in the world as an example. But you know, this is the base. When we're dealing just with the base, you know, this is where the whole magic is. Without the continuity of life, there's nothing. You know, all you ever have then would be the gods masturbating. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. That there's a spark of life and then it's gone. You know, that's not what the yin is all about. The yin says life is eternal and I am its instrument. Remember that. The female psyche has suffered and continues to suffer a great deal. And it's so important for that psyche to take that in again without vanity. You have no attachment to that. You have no real connection to that. And yet it operates through every yin force in the world, the continuity of life. And the continuity of life is the holiest thing of all. Truly, there is nothing holier. You get your vehicle. Oh, Christ, it's boring if you don't have a vehicle. There's nothing. There's nothing. I mean, after all, we're here to play and form in the consciousness game. And Mother is there delivering vehicle after vehicle after vehicle after vehicle in the continuity. We keep feeding them. We keep housing them. We keep on allowing mutation to take place. Out of this collaboration comes survival. And that you can see through this that at the very, very, very deepest level, sex is the most objective thing we've got. Funny. You know, it's not sentimental. It's not any of those things. It is about continuity. That's all. It is about the ultimate survival. You see, the yin-yin, if I take all the yin-yin forces of the world, and I bring all that yin-yin together, and now I could touch it and find out what its dream was to see the continuity of life in the macrocosm fulfilled. This biverse, this living form has to survive and has to be born someplace, somewhere out there in the movement of time. And that every single yin-yin carries that energy, carries that potential of being able to bring that to fruition. This is the real foundation of all life. It's not about consciousness. It's not about awareness. It's not about any of those things. It's about this magnificent life process and how special it is. You know, all of my conversations with you about the changes that are going to have in population, this knowledge that I give you, you know, this knowledge is so we can get to a point that we make sure that there's no gaps. That we make sure that all of the different aspects of the whole are there. Otherwise, the dream of the yin-yin will not survive. You know, we will get to a point where we will have to create life, that we will have to create what cross somebody comes in on, what their definition is going to be. You know, all of those things will be in our hands, and sooner than you think. It's part of our process in order to maintain this. You see, there's something very savage in the mother. The mother will do anything to protect the continuity of the line. It will kill. It will ignore killing. It will do anything. No morality in that. You know, you threaten any female protecting its young and you're in trouble. And it doesn't matter what size it is. There is a ferociousness in the preservation of life that is here in this third base. It's so profound to keep life going, to keep life moving. I want to close with something as the statistics have been coming in. I've been looking with a certain kind of wonder at the 70% of the population that are generators. As a whole, through my personal experience, no type has a stronger reaction to design quicker than generators. It resonates very deep inside of them, and they have relatively, well, they have access to themselves in a way that is often easier than other types. However, the vibration of the planet, the general frustration of our planet, is in the hands of all of these generators operating in things incorrectly and not being in what is right for them according to their type, according to the strategies of what it is to respond in this life. I've personally done readings for thousands of female generators. I mean, thousands. Only hundreds in terms of men, but thousands of female generators. And they are, as a whole, as a group, very sad people. Sad in the sense that that frustration has been very deep in their lives. And one of the things that I notice most about them is that they have forgotten the magic of what it is to be female. They've forgotten the enormous power and grace and beauty in what it is to be female. And they can quickly learn that. I know so many who have. By coming to themselves, by living out through response and seeing what naturally comes to them, the respect that comes to them, the authority that comes to them, whatever that happens to be. But it's very important when you're dealing with somebody who is a female generator who's going to be a third base, and there's going to be tens of millions of them. And they're the ones that hold the fire of the beauty of the yin. It is up to them whether that fire grows, or as now, that fire is held underneath and is dimmed by the dominance of male propaganda, which has been going on for several thousand years. It's been going on since Homer in our Western culture. And the moment that those generators are liberated, the moment they stop being slaves, that's the moment that you're going to see that we're going to get a change, a shift in the power structure. Power naturally belongs in the hands of the yin. It just does. And it's only when it's in the hands of the yin, and not that the yin has taken it, but the yin is collaborating with the yang, that's saying, yes, here, go ahead, bring me into this collaboration. Civilize me, make me more respectable. I'm not going to fart at the dinner table anymore. All of that stuff. That was a nice little segue, wasn't it? There's going to be people who deconstruct that. What was Ra actually referring to? Yeah, never mind. I don't want to get too deep into that. One of the most important contributions that you can make in the education of anyone is to educate generators the moment that you contact them. But particularly this whole question about the nature of the yin, I am very sensitive to that, and I see that throughout most of this planet, the vast majority of females are deeply limited, restricted, and in many cases abused. And that is an incredible energy that's being placed out there. And this is, after all, the continuity of life. It is through them that life is moving. And, that level of abuse and that impact on that spirit is ultimately one of the most unhealthiest things that is taking place. Waking people up to their nature and waking people up to their type, that's the beginning of real healing. And in looking at this and in seeing that this continuity of life means everything for us, it also means that it is only through this that we get to see the truth of ourselves, that we do come in on the wheel of life, that we come in this movement, that we are a biological unit, and that we're a biological unit that can never really not collaborate. Because after all, that's how our life began. That's what the mother teaches us. She collaborates with us in the birthing process. Because after all, fetus and mother work together in that process to bring about life. That it's the yin that understands the nature of collaboration. And that collaboration doesn't mean that you have to like it. It means that what it's about is so important. And when finally can we be at peace? When finally can we be secure? When finally can we be secure in the collaboration that we have, that we know we're going to have the resources that we need so that we can freely continue this process of life? Through this yin-yin base, you can see the glory of what the female spirit really is. Through the yang-yang, yes, you can see its beauty as well. After all, it gets all this going, it's juicy and bouncy and everything else. But it's a byproduct of the mother. Without the yin-yin, there is no yang-yang. And in the end, it is the yin-yin that will allow the yang-yang to disappear, and there will not be any tears shed. None. None at all. It actually makes good sense to get rid of all those busy characters, and stay with those that you can really collaborate with so that you can really be deeply hooked up to each other. You see, the yin-yang gets in the way of us finally being able to fully cooperate. It's the yin-yin that teaches us cooperation. It's the yin-yin that insists that we learn how to cooperate. There's this great play by Aristophanes, the Lysistrata, in which Greek women refuse to make love to their husbands unless they stop fighting war. Yeah, you go home and fight war, but don't come home to me. And that was quite a dilemma for the boys. What are they going to do? Mama says, hey, collaboration at its best in order to protect and in order to bring about survival.